Hello everyone. In the wake of the murder of Charlie Kirk, a lot of leftists and liberals have been starting to experience the real-world consequences for toxic speech online that the right used to complain about roughly a decade ago. In reaction to this, many are pointing out the hypocrisy of conservatives complaining about uncomfortable speech online and then demanding that progressives be identified and fired for just exercising their right to freedom of expression. And I agree. It's pretty rich that the same people who insisted that mere words and ideas that make us uncomfortable aren't violent and shouldn't be met with real economic penalties that actually have the ability to really harm people and their families are now suddenly demanding that people who post messages mocking Charlie Kirk's death should be fired from their jobs. This is rank hypocrisy of the lowest order. But also, what were these leftists and liberals who made these posts expecting? I think there was a period a while ago where leftists and liberals were under the impression that progressivism was ascending in the West, with conservatives and racists being frequently censored and banned off of major social media platforms, and progressive values being paid lip service in almost every form of popular corporate media, from movies to video games to books, even Gillette razor commercials. However, by now it is very clear that this was never really what was going on. Companies were pretending to be progressive to cash in on what they mistakenly believed was a permanent cultural shift towards liberalism and progressivism that in fact was illusory and transient. Yes, progressivism and leftism were quote-unquote on the rise, but so is conservatism, and guess who has the most capital? So now we are faced with a situation in which the bare, unveiled power of capital is the only determiner of norms. We have a president who is aligned with nakedly reactionary and racist billionaires, a toothless judiciary, and a flaccid, corrupt Democratic Party whose strongest moral stance at this point is a tepid call for a slightly less enthusiastic genocide, please. And as a result of this situation, the power-worshipping right is flexing its limbs in this new, normless, lawless world, and leftists and liberals are completely shell-shocked by the rank hypocrisy.
A lot. I mean, Joe Biden is a bumbling, dementia-filled Alzheimer's, corrupt tyrant who should honestly be put in prison and or given the death penalty for his crimes against America.
The naked, shameless 180-degree turn by the right on all of the supposed values and principles they asserted back when they didn't hold all of the cards. And now that they do, and leftists and liberals are powerless, they're lashing out. Wildly. They're reacting to the Charlie Kirk assassination with posts celebrating his death, as they have been encouraged to do so by big leftist influencers for a long time now. This makes them big strong. And then when these big strong grave dancers end up being reported to their bosses or to their coworkers and end up losing their livelihoods, they get very upset and start decrying the hypocrisy of the right. And again, I have to ask, what were these people expecting? Now with liberals, I kinda get it. They're basically just low-T conservatives. Liberals thought they had bought leniency by selling out on advocacy for basic human rights and normalizing hate speech as just another innocent participant in the marketplace of ideas. I understand why liberals feel betrayed. They already betrayed everybody else for capital. They assumed they were in on it. But leftists? Is the left seriously surprised, outraged, that the system they literally exist to subvert gives favorable treatment to people that exist to uphold it? Are leftists seriously wasting energy pointing out that the right is hypocritical on X.com owned by Elon Musk? The right knows they are hypocritical. They've embraced the rule of pure power for a long while now, and the left needs to get with the program and stop squandering its energy, shaking its fists at clouds about the petty unfairnesses of systems, organizations, companies, and media platforms that were always aligned with capital and which were always antagonists towards us. It isn't just that the right knows they are hypocritical, it's that we collectively already know that the right knows they are hypocritical. What are we doing? Similarly, I see people constantly arguing about whether Charlie Kirk's killer is a leftist or a right-winger, as if we had any actual stake in that. And it's so frustrating because it obviously doesn't matter. For two reasons. First, because if the killer is a Marxist, then he's a leftist. If the killer is a liberal, then he's a leftist. If the killer is a centrist, then he's a leftist. If the killer is a conservative who is a transphobic, then he's a leftist. If the killer is a radical right-wing white nationalist who has a trans girlfriend, then he's a leftist. If the killer has a trans roommate or a friend, then he's a leftist. That is how things work in this media, and by the time you've all exhausted yourselves arguing that, well, no, actually, this isn't really representative of leftists, and leftism is really more specific than just being okay with trans people, actually, the event of Charlie Kirk's murder has already been used to motivate further ideological crackdowns on progressives, and none of your arguments will have accomplished anything except to tell the right what they already know, that the rules don't apply to them anymore, and to wear you out. Second, it also doesn't matter, because even if the killer turns out in the end to be a radical right-wing white nationalist groyper who hates trans and gay people, the spectacle of thousands of leftists and liberals online, again, in the eyes of most of the world, these are the same thing. Dancing on Charlie Kirk's grave means that conservatives have the rhetorical right of way to declare that even if the killer was a right-wing nutjob, the left is so eager to endorse what that nutjob did, he may as well represent their values anyway. And I can't stress this enough, the general population does not recognize any difference between liberals and leftists. Destiny, Stephen Bennell II, currently in court for sharing intimate videos of other streamers without their permission with a minor, just made himself look like an absolute monstrous fool on Piers Morgan while being called by everyone on the panel a leftist.
Mean? Oh no, not the meanies on Twitter.
I know.
How many more
people
lawsuits are you going to face from women that you allegedly secretly recorded during intimate moments, Destiny? I can't believe anyone takes you seriously.
Are you really?
You're disgusting,
You're
embarrassing, and you should be shunned from public life with your disgusting treatment of all sorts of people, including young left-wing girls, women that you victimize allegedly. Yeah, that's who you are.
2 shades away from being
You're
a Fox News host,
embarrassing.
Anna.
You
Keep
embarrass the
going.
left. You're the type of person who pushes people away from the left. Make sure you understand that. You're embarrassing.
And did he correct the record? No, despite the fact that he's a neoliberal who infamously purged all of his leftist audience when they were critical of him playing footsie with Lauren Southern and Nick Fuentes.
Okay. We've had community purges before, guys. All right? I'm not even mad about this one. Looking at the pushback on the sub on whether or not we label somebody a particular thing has solidified that opinion for me. If there were posts and it was like, Nick believes this and that, I think this would qualify him for this word, and that was like everything, it'd be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But when the vast majority of posts are like, why would you call him this fucking word? He just won't do it anymore. Why don't you just fucking call him nothing? He just fucking call him a fucking word. It's like, that's okay. Different people do things for different reasons. But if you're one of those people, I don't want you interacting with my community or posting my community, because I think that your mindset is toxic, and I don't want to see it, and I don't want my people exposed to it.
And notice, even with quote-unquote actual leftists, all of the big leftist figureheads who endorsed reckless, violent ideation in public against conservatives are all suddenly very quiet. They're all suddenly so subdued. If anything, many of the most prominent are using the opportunity to virtue signal about how terrible they think what happened to Kirk is. Hassan Piker's op-ed in the New York Times was a bit of a genius stroke in this regard, shining a light on all of the ways in which Charlie Kirk's own positions contributed to the kind of violence that he himself ended up a victim of while maintaining the humanity of the victim, and of Hassan Piker, who was able to make himself stand out by not cackling like a demon over Charlie Kirk's death. Nonetheless, the fact remains. Those leftists closest to Capitol are either getting real quiet, or they're using the opportunity to signal to Capitol that despite their opinions on the surface, they can be trusted to play within the lines. To quote from Jean Baudrillard, quote, "If one envisions the entire cycle of any act or event in a system where linear continuity and dialectical polarity no longer exist, in a field unhinged by simulation, all determination evaporates. Every act is terminated at the end of the cycle, having benefited everyone and having been scattered in all directions. Is any given bombing in Italy the work of leftist extremists, or extreme right provocation, or a centrist mise-en-scene to discredit all extreme terrorists and to shore up its own failing power, or again, is it a police-inspired scenario and a form of blackmail to public security? All of this is simultaneously true, and the search for proof, indeed the objectivity of the facts, does not put an end to this vertigo of interpretation. That is, we are in a logic of simulation, which no longer has anything to do with a logic of facts and an order of reason." Unquote. Despite all of their hot-headed rhetoric in the past, rhetoric that may well turn out to have inspired what happened to Charlie Kirk, suddenly it turns out that the most violent thing these bold, transgressive revolutionaries are capable of is a mere exchange of signs, signaling their ultimate support for the system. The fact of the matter is that these big leftists who were so reckless with calls to violence in the media before never believed what they were saying. Not really. They got money and attention from being edgy and transgressive on their Twitch and YouTube channels from the safety of their bedrooms, but notice how as soon as something happens for real that can put their incomes at risk, that can put their access to these platforms at risk, how quickly they pose as moderates who would never endorse something so terrible as what happened to Charlie Kirk. And notice, none of these figures will lift a finger to help their viewers who followed their example and have now had their lives completely uprooted. Even the most extreme have been dead silent. This is a great place to highlight Bad Empanada in particular. Bad Empanada, who has expressed seething jealousy at Hassan's access to the New York Times, has, unlike Hassan, explicitly encouraged his viewers to engage in stochastic terrorism before the killing of Charlie Kirk here.
And if there is something that you should preach, it's that these people are ultimately fucking useless, and you're gonna have to do shit yourself.
Yeah,
So what does that look like?
Here's the thing. I understand.
Mario's brother?
What?
After the killing of Charlie Kirk, however, Bad Empanada locked down his subreddit and posted to YouTube trying to pose as the mature voice of reason who doesn't think violent rhetoric gets us anywhere. Notice how as soon as something real happens and their gravy trains are suddenly in danger, all of these superficial pseudo-leftist hacks pretending to be brave, edgy revolutionaries who don't fear no censors and speak truth to power are suddenly deafeningly quiet, suddenly so timid. Leftists who follow these people need to wake up and smell the roses. We were never winning. Not in any definitive sense, not in the sense that would justify the kind of arrogance and presumption that we've been demonstrating for so long. And we need to stop acting in stupid ways that make us appear evil, or at least uniquely evil. Some of you have some nasty demons crawling around inside.
Charlie Kirk got shot and he's dead!
And creating a situation in which the powers that be have full cultural sanction to persecute and silence us. We need to come to terms with the fact that the rules of the game are unfair and slanted against us. To be honest, I'm kind of baffled this needs to be said. This should be obvious. If things were fair, there wouldn't need to be a left, would there? We need to start playing smart. If you absolutely must spend your energy online, then by all means, use it to speak truth to power, point out hypocrisy, point out the right's cruelty, point out the liberals' cruelty and complicity too. But take the 10 goddamn minutes it takes to think of a way to do it that doesn't help falsely incriminate other people while achieving nothing. Bluntly, in my honest opinion, it would be better for most of you to give up on arguing online altogether. I think it's a trap. I think it gets us swept up into toxic, terminally online monocultures that only serve as a liability for our real-world resources, for our ability to function and live and to organize in the real world. For the left, the internet should be a tool for educating and for networking. None of these things are achievable on Twitter or Blue Sky right now. They are merely vampires of time at best, and reputational and economic hazards at worst. And that's leaving out entirely the fact that on X, Elon has access to all of your private messages and will do absolutely nothing to protect you from insane right-wingers stalking you into your private life. We don't win by acting like crazy people in these spaces. We win by offering something new, which we can't do if we are exhausting ourselves screaming bloody murder in spaces that have already incorporated our outrage into their business models. The challenge to the left right now is to figure out how to divest from these platforms and from the pseudo-leftist online cults of personality that have functioned for too long as a mechanism for domesticating leftist energy, for exhausting it on useless spectacle that does nothing for us. We will have made real progress in terms of equipping the left for the present age when we learn how to respond to something like what happened to Charlie Kirk, not with performative cruelty, not with false conciliation, but with total, indifferent silence. The correct response to what happened to Charlie Kirk, especially in the absence of any clear information concerning the motives and associations of the killer, but either way, was not to debate whether they represent the left or not to litigate what the ideology of the killer is or isn't. The correct response, the winning response, was always to say nothing. This response was foreclosed to us, however, because too many of us are plugged into cults of personality like Bad Empanadas, like Voshes, like Destinies, so that even if now, for this issue, the people at the centers of these little personality cults have suddenly found their capacity for moderating their message, so many people have been trained to expect approval for dancing on the graves of their enemies on social media that the left, which effectively lacks any real identity of substance at this point in time, can be easily represented as homogeneously bloodthirsty and lacking in values or even the capacity for empathy. Characteristics that make it so that nobody wants to be around us. And that is how we lose. Power is all about connections. Not cynical bridges built between media figures trying to leech off each other's clout, but real connections between people. People have to want the left to win before it can. That is the great game. And yeah, the right breaks its own standards all of the time. It's really unfair. Get over it. There are no consolation prizes for losing with the right opinions, for being consistent and still being trammeled. We either win or we die, and right now we are losing big time. It's time we started acting like we were serious and exercising some deliberation and prudence with what we do and say. So to start with, I'm just going to say it outright. Unplug from X. Unplug from Blue Sky. Unplug from Twitch and YouTube. By all means, make use of these platforms to connect with people to build networks of support, but don't waste your time in de facto fandoms for dirtbag leftist posers who livestream for a living. Don't waste your time in toxic Discord servers, where losers use their victim status to abuse other members to make up for their lack of power in real life. Don't spend time on Reddit, effort posting to get your favorite streamer to maybe, possibly, not be so anti-intellectual and incurious, and to maybe read some theory or something like it would matter if they did. These platforms are aligned with capital. These figureheads are also aligned with capital, and you are their fuel to be burned, regardless of their political branding. And if you ever find yourself overwhelmed by the impulse to make a spectacle of cheering for some atrocity online, either because you think the victim deserved it or because of something they said or did, I strongly advise you to turn off your computer and go outside. And as always, thank you for listening, and take care.